So this is the fox I drew on a pot and then photographed it and photocopied it and shrank it down. So I've got a couple different sizes to fit on different pots. And I just found when I went back to draw this again, it was like, man, it's tough to get it the right size on the pot and try to fill that space. So I made myself a little copy of it. And I'll go ahead and I'll trace. I'll just rough in. If it was as, I wish it, well, if it was as easy as just doing this to get the same fox again and again, it would be nice, but they always come out different. The way that the oxide wash is painted on, the sort of subtle shifts in how thick it is, make a great difference in the end product. And so I can't just say, oh, well, I'll just trace it on and it'll be exactly the same as the last one, because it's just never the same. And when sometimes people come to my booth and they'll look at something and they'll go, wow, I like it, but maybe I'll wait. I tell them, don't wait. Like if you really like it, you might never ever see it that way again. There might be something about that particular piece that, I just can't replicate. So my brushes, I brought out these two brushes. These are homemade brushes made by Jo Ellen Grubbs. She took a brush making class. This is a great long line brush that you can put on something and have this beautiful long line. And this is what I would consider a brush that makes a brush mark. Like you use this brush because you want a brush mark. And likewise, this is sort of in between. This is a manufactured brush, but you can put a fair amount of glaze down. It doesn't have much kickback though. Once you sort of break that tip, once you've pushed down enough to get rid of that tip, it doesn't really come back to a point. Not a great line brush. It's hard to make a really long line with this brush. And then we've got, but those would be brushes I would consider brushes for brushing sake. And then we've got stuff like this, and this you get at Michael's. And it's, what size is this? This is like a 1 or a 0 size brush. And it's got a long tip and it snaps back to a point. As soon as you let the pressure off, it comes right back to the point. It's made out of a different type of hair than these are made out of. This is probably deer tail. And this is something completely different. This might even be synthetic. This is a brush I use to paint. You don't use this for a brush's sake. It's like a paintbrush. And there's certain things that I do that I want like a mark of a brush, and there's certain things that I'm painting an image onto the pot, and I'm less concerned about the mark I get from the brush. Is just how I can put material down to give me the best results. So if you guys know Michael Klein's work, his work, those the black, a lot of times you use black, and it's these floral patterns, and it's very much brush mark work. And so he doesn't want to use a brush like this because this won't give him what he wants in the end. But this is for my little detailed stuff. I like to use something like this. And I've got a whole range of brushes. I used to go online and buy these from, I think, Oriental Brush Supply or something like that. And I would get this type of brush, or these guys. This one used to look better. It used to go to a point, and it was good for a while for a point. But I just started going to Michael's recently, and I'd just get something like this to paint, to fill in on an area. And it gives me what I need. It's not the kind of thing I'm going to do brush work with, but it's a good thing to paint with. And this one, I actually took some scissors and sharpened it up after a while. It became a little bit full on the top. And I don't mind doing that to this brush. It's not a very expensive brush. I can cut at it, and I can make it shape it the way I want it to be shaped in order to paint something on. So originally I start with a drawing. And this, I'm going to show you this technique, and I spray glaze over this. But you could certainly do this on top of a white glaze that doesn't move very much. You could do this type of work onto it. You could draw on it with a pencil. I have students who've fired in the atmospheric kilns at Guilford, and I've had them, they've wanted to decorate stuff, and I've told them, you know, dip it in crackle slip, like a really thin crackle slip, and draw on top of that with a pencil, and then paint it with underglazes, and just face it so that you don't get the direct hit from wood ash. And they've gotten some pretty good results from that as well. So you can use it in a lot of different ways. I'm going to keep on moving this around. Is that? You can find me. And I just use this template to kind of mark areas on here. When I first started doing this, I had a really hard time getting the consistency of the material right on this, in order that the birds, it was mostly birds back then, birds and rabbits, but the rabbits are big, so there's different issues with those. I can have things bubble up on a big rabbit head and it doesn't wreck them, but if they bubble up on this little fox face, you know, like all of a sudden his nose becomes this like clown nose, this black clown nose. So I've drawn them on there, and then the next thing I'm going to do is take my Mason stain and color them in. So I'm going to do 3 different types. I'll do this fox, I'll draw a bird on the inside of this and hopefully decorate the outside, and then I'll do a rabbit on the inside of the bowl and put the wash on the back.
Do you, on the Mason stain, do you stick with the mix of stain with Gursley borate?
Yeah. And I do use Gursley borate, and I'm glad to know that you guys have. But Gursley borate, I find, works better than Laguna borate for this, or whatever borate we had at Guilford that was not this. It just, that stuff melts differently, and there's probably a ratio that's fine. And that 70-30 ratio is just, in some ways, an arbitrary ratio. It's just, it's what I've used. You could do an 80-20, you could do a 50-50. They're going to give you different results. You know, certainly the more closer to 50-50 you do, the more melter you have in there.
I think you're calling this a Mason stain. Is that different than this oxide?
Yeah, Mason stain's a manufactured stain, so it's been fired up to temperature and then ground back down.
What you mix with the mortar to match the brick closely? Is that what you're using? What they mix with mortar?
Probably. Yeah, I guess. It's a high temperature stain, so maybe it's a little.
Like a powder?
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to sell that brickyard food to match the different colors, the brick closer.
So underglaze would give you the same result?
A black underglaze would probably give you the exact same result. And I've used black I haven't,
You say it smears, and it does.
this smears, yeah. Black underglaze does not. If I'm gonna paint this on the outside of a pot and put it in the wood kiln, I'm gonna do it with black underglaze, because I know students are gonna handle it at some point, and they might not be careful about touching the decoration. And so I'd use that underglaze over this Mason stain. I would say, use what you got, see how it works. And if it doesn't work, then try something different. If it works, then stick with it, which is basically what I've done.
Do you have to decorate on just the green layer?
I haven't, no. You could.
Yeah. But I guess because you're using such smooth clay, it's not a problem once it's bisqued.
Right.
Yeah.
And not only that, but like I want to glaze the inside of this. I guess I could decorate the outside biscuit and glaze the inside and be okay. But if I've got to glaze the inside and wipe off the outside someplace, I don't want to have to wipe off where I've just decorated. So sometimes I get a little bit too much. I get a little over anxious here. And my dental tools come in handy to scrape Scrape some material off. That's how I get rid of lines. That looks a little thick right up there. You getting this on film?
It's not up under your chin.
Hiding it. Need a little bit more water on this. I lost my train of thought. If I was, so like sometimes I draw on these and I don't like what I've drawn, or I change my mind, or I just make a bad drawing. Believe it or not, that happens. And to get rid of those, I'll just take a wet sponge or wet paper towel and just wipe right over my drawing, let it dry. I can draw again, and I'll see my students trying to erase it with an eraser. And I don't know what that rubber is going to do. Maybe nothing, but
So you don't leave any stains, smears behind or anything when you do that?
oh, the stain, you couldn't do it with the stain, but you could do it if you could do it with the pencil. Like when I penciled this on, if I'm unhappy with the way what I've penciled on or it didn't work, I used to do that a lot when I was just trying to like hand draw this fox on here every time, and I'd get down to here and be like, oh, the head's too big for the body, and I'd have to go back and touch it up. I usually don't have to scrape this much off, but
Once the stain's on there, it has to be ground.
yes, you can't wipe the stain off. I'm nervous. You guys are making me nervous, so having to go back and change this fox a little bit. All right, so I've got the black in, and this is my container of watered down black. So I've got black and I've got brown, and I've got different consistencies of those two glazes.
What's the consistency like of that black that you just used?
It's watery enough that I can paint it on there. It's thinner than oil paint, but it would be like a thick watercolor. It would be like a full saturated watercolor. And then I'm going to fill in his leg here.
Charlie, if you want to get rid of pencil mark without washing it off, you can take a piece of broken pottery, this pottery, and scrub it, and it comes off.
That pencil mark. The pencil doesn't show up in the end, so
Burn out.
yeah. Now, if you use if you wanted some pencil marks to show up, you could use like a burnt sienna pencil or something like that. It has some iron in it, and you could draw on there, and you'd probably get some pencil. That's what Phil tells me, at least. He would just.
Using a regular number 2 pencil right now.
I'm just using a regular number 2 pencil, and I like the mechanical pencils because I can get a really fine line with it. And luckily, I didn't have one. Luckily, I was able to borrow one. And then this is my watered down iron. What? I got one. A mechanical? Yeah. So there's certain areas of this that I'll want darker than other areas, and this place right behind this tail to kind of drop that back is an area that could be darker. So I'll start there, not knowing how rich my iron is when I start. I haven't been using it for a little while. And right here behind the leg, a little darker. So I'll work into spots that I want lighter. But it doesn't look like particularly thick.
So is that just red iron oxide wash, or is that one of these washes?
It's the red iron oxide wash with the Gersley borate. And those are just, I don't know where, I think I got that out of the Cushing handbook that he had some washes in there, and like most of his washes were 70% wash, or 70% like oxide and 30% Gersley borate. So I just took that and mixed it. And the Mason stain, there's a couple blacks, I think. But the 6600 is one that'll stay black, that it won't go brown or blue. And so as you can see on this, there's areas that are lighter, areas that are darker. There's areas that you can really see like a brush pattern on. And this will all give me some variation when I spray the glaze over it. And I sent you that image, I don't know if it came up yet, of one of my pots actually glazed. So after I finish this, we can look at that and talk about. So I've pretty much got the fox on there. I'll do a little bit of hair in here. I'm still working these ears out. I'm not sure totally how they should go. I want it to look like there's some depth in the ear, but there's also a lot of hair in there. So I've
My next question, are you able to get gradations of gray or the black to gray area? Can you control that? I don't think that's one thing I've ever discussed. When we're doing Violica, we didn't have much control of the color. It was either black or it's not on there. We couldn't see it. We did Violica for a number of years.
If you look over at some of those pieces, I can get some mid-tones, and it's just a watered down version of the black as opposed to something else. Or
None of your foxes are totally red, will a lot of that fades out from firing?
that, so you see that fox that's standing and facing the other direction, he was probably painted similar to this. So the glaze bleaches out the iron because there's so much calcium in the ash that it'll bleach the iron to like a yellow or even like completely get rid of it, which became an issue sometimes on the birds, on the bottom side of birds. That line would just burn out, and so I'd have like this wing area, and then there would be no definition for where the bird ended in the bottom. So I had to recently I started rinsing my brushes in a container, and I get like this black and brown solution, and I would use that black brown because the black is going to like come out no matter what. And so I'd use that black brown solution to draw some of those areas and outline the bird in certain areas where I thought, well, if it disappears here, it's going to be bad. There's other areas like around the tail where if it fades in and out, it's okay, but across the head and some into the back and on that bottom, it really needs to be like a strong line. And
So you're going over it more than once, actually.
so I'll come back in and draw. I mean, this guy, he's good. If I get some fade where it goes to white, that's fine. If it's a little bit thinner through here, it's okay. There's certain areas that it's like, oh, you can have this change, but he's outlined in black. And from a drawing standpoint, maybe that's not the best solution. It's like if you're out in the art world and you saw somebody's paintings and they're like outlining stuff in black, you'd think, well, why do you have black at the edge of this brown coat? But I have to have something out there to sort of like solidify that line, or else I can lose it from the glaze. All right, so is this in a good spot right here? All right, so now I'm going to draw this rabbit, and I've drawn this rabbit enough times, I think. We'll see what happens here, that I can pretty much draw them. My brother gave me the video, or the first season of Breaking Bad. Has anybody seen that show?
Yeah.
He got me that for Christmas like 2 years ago, and I finally watched it recently. My wife wasn't really into it. It was like too much. She didn't want to see that. So I would stay up at night and decorate pots and watch Breaking Bad. And it was, if you've seen it before, it can be pretty intense. And get your heart rate up. So it was great to decorate pots because I didn't really have to watch it. There could be stuff going on screen. I could just like listen to it and I wouldn't have to see the violence or whatever. And but I could like listen to it and decorate.
My son got that for Christmas.
Did
I think
you
it's
grab
the
it?
second year it gets to the point where something happens that I just couldn't watch anymore. And this was spread out over a period of time.
I'm gonna put this a little further out. I don't want this line to continue down and look like it's going right into his chest. So change that a little bit. And so then after, so I watched Breaking Bad I watched the whole, all of it that was on Netflix. Got Netflix to finish it up. And then Phil Harlem, who's teaching at Guilford this semester and living with us, one of my former students, teaching 2D design, and he'll teach ceramics this summer. He was like, "Oh, have you seen Walking Dead?" I was like, "Haven't seen Walking Dead." So I started watching Walking Dead, and it was not a good way to spend my evening, and then try to go to bed at like midnight after having seen like zombies for an hour or two. All right, so this one I'll do. This is all going to be in the interior. This can be completely black. So I'll. So with this, I'm like thinking about space, and getting something in there that fills this space and sort of interacts with the edge and the space and ways that make it dynamic.
So what type of brush is that? Is that one of the?
This is just that O brush, this line brush. Sometimes I've done this with a brush that will give me a variation. If I push a little bit harder, it'll give me a little wider line and then snap back to a point. And so if you go to Oriental Brush Supply, if you want sort of like a Japanese style brush to draw paint with, they'll tell you what the brush is used for. It's like, this is a combination brush, this is a fill brush, this is a line brush, this is a dot brush. And so you can pick your brush based on what you want it to do. So like if you try to draw a line with a fill brush, bad news. And so if you've gone to like the bookstore, like Guilford bookstore has these Sumi brushes. And if you get one of those and you try to do line work with it, you're going to be miserable because it's really a fill brush. It's like for like broad areas to lay like a lot of material down. And it does not give you can't draw like a long line with it at all. And then if you're trying to like fill a large area with a brush like this, it's like you're fighting against what it wants to do, which is always come back to a point. So like on the underside of this ear, like having a little bit more pressure.
What was the name of that company? Oriental Brush?
It was like Oriental Brush Supply or. And they'll have like the Happy Dot brush, and they'll have a video of somebody using the Happy Dot brush. Show you how to use it.
If you're gonna order a set of brushes online or something like that, and there's choices of sable or pony hair or this or that, what type of hair would you choose?
I don't know the hairs well enough to know which type to use. I would say go to a reputable site that's going to tell you what the brush is used for. Like my first brushes I ordered, I got from like Amazon, and they were just. It was this set of it was these guys, this set of brushes, and they were cheap, and they're just big fill brushes, and I use them. I use this one to make a pattern with, and it's great for that. But I wouldn't want to be doing any of this with it. And it came in a set. And I would say that I would not steer a student towards that, or somebody who's like interested in brushes. I would say go on to someplace like Oriental Brush Supply and pick out like 5 brushes. And they have ones that they say are for pottery, but I would just look at all the brushes. and pick out the ones that have characteristics that you think you need.
Stones, Chinese seals, Chinese painting books, instructional videos.
Really would prefer to be right about here.
And newsletters.
Have you guys ever tried to do brushwork on pots?
Oh, yeah.
And it was always like you try to make like a line or something, you try sort of this. I don't know this. It was like really big at one point to these like brush marks and stuff. Tom Coleman used to do a lot of that. It's like real expressive brush marks, and I tried that too. It didn't work for me so well. And I think part of it was I didn't have the right brush for what I was trying to do. I was probably trying to take one of those Sumi brushes and make this like long, like sweeping curve, and you like get about like 2 inches into it, and the brush would just like collapse into like a blob. And it's like, how do you do that? And you don't realize that the people who are doing that and doing it well are probably have like $100 brush to do that. So the first time I came across one of those was at NCECA in Charlotte many years ago. Does anybody remember when that was? It was like
2000 or something.
yeah, 2000, 99 or 2000. And I went down there, and there was a guy who used to be there, and maybe he's still at the NCECA's, and he was selling handmade brushes. And some of these were really expensive brushes, you know, like $200, $300 brush. But there was some that were like $50, $60, which at the time was way too much for me. But he had some samples out that people could use. And man, what a difference. It was like, oh yeah, I understand now why you pay $50 for one of these brushes, because you can do like a $50 line with this brush. And I know that like Kent, Susie, what's Susie's last name? Susie Lindsay's husband, Kent, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, McLaughlin. He makes brushes, and I've got one or two of his, and they're good. He makes some good, like some line brushes.
You came here and did a brush seminar.
Did he? So I used to make my own brushes too. And I tried to make like a Hakami brush at one point, and I made this awful Hakami brush that would just give me like all these lines and stuff. I couldn't get like a smooth coat, and I threw it in a box and didn't look at it for a couple of years. And then at some point I wanted to start, I was like doing some slip trailing. I thought, well, maybe I could use some texture. And so I broke that brush out, and I was doing this like watery, like grass kind of like texture. And I still do it occasionally, not as much anymore.
Inside bowls, and then you did
The green celadon, yeah, the blue-green celadon, yeah. And it's
showed that to us at one of your
at one of the,
shows.
and I thought, I still have some of those pots. I make them occasionally still, and I love that glaze and that surface. It's mostly I just haven't mixed up the slip, like gotten around to doing that. So this is the paint drying part, where like watching me paint this in maybe feels like a little much. If you guys are antsy, let me know.
Do you know how many coats to put on for the right position?
I'm just from time and practice. I mean, really, I wish there was an easier way I could say like, oh, if you just do this, but it's like the spraying of the glaze. It just took me years to do it. And luckily, when I spraying the glaze starting out, I didn't start out trying to go over something like this, because that would have been, the failure rate would have been too high, and I just would have given up. But I'd used that glaze for many years before I started to decorate with it, so I kind of had a basic understanding of what it would do, or what it could do. But this is just time. And then I still, every time I glaze pots, I still freak out. I'm like, still feel like, did I just put too much on? Crap, what? Is it gonna come out? Am I gonna ruin this image that I worked 2 hours on? You know, some of those scrolling vine images, I could just like one shot on a bird head, just like too much. And and I'm sweating it until the kiln's unloaded. And I always, until the kiln's unloaded and I'm seeing them come out, I'm always nervous that I've put too much on or I haven't put enough on. So yeah, you guys want to do this workshop? I'd come, we'll glaze some pots and spend some hours on decorating stuff, see how it comes out. I'm not being a very good salesperson for this technique.
Oh, please do, come back.
I've got that show June 1st, so I bet I'll fire 3 days before, well, 4 days before that, at least. And unload it on that Friday, and I'll be glazing the day before I load it. So if you want to watch me glaze, just count back 5 days from June 1st. Come over to Guilford. Watch me spray some glaze on pots. You can email me. That's the only way. If you like really want to get a good understanding, you just got to watch me for about an hour spray glaze and ask me questions as I'm doing it.
So is your consistency, or your color variation, is it more like watercolor or is it not?
Yeah, it is very much like watercolor. I can see through it pretty much, even at its thickest. And so one thing I think about is like, well, where do I want my blackest blacks to be? Like where are those spots where I really need some depth? And then where are the lightest parts of the pot? So this like mouth is one spot that's pretty dark. And then I feel like I've got to get it dark down in this corner because that's supposed to be fading away. And then as it moves out towards the rabbit's back, I don't really want it as dark. And I might use a bigger brush for this. I have this other brush. A lot of times I use this for something, but I just kind of started with this one. And since I'm nervous, I'm just...
Awesome.
Are you guys getting any of this on the camera?
Point it up to the camera.
I'm constantly moving. Is it right here?
It looks like one of those home videos where everybody's running around.
Yeah. I'll keep moving it though, because I keep you on your toes. So this is also a pretty dark spot back here in this ear. I like to think that ear is deep. Hey,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Hey, I missed it.
I was telling them you can come and watch me spray some glaze for a couple hours. 5 days before the June 1st.
Where's the show in June first?
It's going to be on Guilford campus we're going to do it up at the corner of New Garden and College Road, like right there at the edge of campus. But apparently I got an email back that Nan's Dance Company that's down in Greensboro they must be using Dana Auditorium to do their big like recital. And so they're going to push us back to Hendricks Hall, which is like the continuing ed spot, the CCE spot. And so actually it'll be good. Maybe we'll get some people from Nan's Dance Studio to come down and buy some pots.
We need to put a couple of flowers in Dana Auditorium, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of fathers that, after their child dances, they need to,
Oh yeah, yeah, pottery and flowers.
yeah.
That's a great idea. Yeah, the mothers will remember it, but the fathers. So now I've got that eye. But I want like the sense of that there's some light coming down on that eyeball. So that's pretty much it for that part. I could kind of come back in and maybe darken some of these areas up, but that's pretty. Oh, let me see. Let me grab this bigger brush. All right. I'm not moving too much. All right, so then I've got this iron wash, and I'm going to mix this up real good. And here's my fill brush. Here's my Sumi brush that I got at Guilford College bookstore. I didn't really, but that's where I get them at Michael's too. And I'm going to fill in the background. And this is what I've learned about filling the background in, is that you will see the brush stroke with my glaze. And so I've got to be conscious of how I'm filling that in, because that stroke is going to be visible in the end.
Makes a real nice gold color.
Yeah, I kind of wish I could get this in the end. Sometimes I can. There's really no rhyme or reason. Well, there is. There's probably a very good reason. I just don't. Even having done this for so many years, there's still times when I get stuff out of the kiln and I go, really? How is that the result? And other times where I get stuff out of the kiln, I go, oh my gosh, if I could get that every time. Like that one fox on that flat vase, that thing is like speckled and furry in a way that, man, I wish I could get that every time, but that's what, I guess, if I could get it every time, then I'd want something else. That reminds me, when I first started working with ash glazes, I thought, well, I'll make a red ash glaze. I'll take the colorants from a red glaze and I'll put them in my ash glaze and I'll get a red glaze. And of course, that red glazes are red glazes because they're formulated to be red glazes, not because of the colorants in them. I mean, the colorants are what make them red, but the body of the glaze also is really important, and how much they melt and stuff. So instead, I got this green glaze, and it just irked me that I couldn't get my red. And I got this like really soft, beautiful green. But at the time, it wasn't red, so it wasn't right. So I didn't pursue that at all. And then at some point, I really wanted that green again, and I just couldn't get it back. And I've had students test for years. So the other, and I was firing in an Olympic updraft. No, it was a downdraft kiln, but it was a fiber kiln, an Olympic fiber kiln that was all natural gas, fired with natural gas. And I bet I wasn't getting like hardly any reduction in it. It was probably almost all oxidation. And it also cooled. You turn the kiln off and it would just crash cool because it was made of fiber, and so it just wouldn't hold any heat. And so that probably, those two things, and then maybe the ash I was getting all combined together gave me this green that I can't get unless I fire differently. All right, so because I have these marks, I'm worried about my lines I've drawn in here and like what this area is gonna look like. You guys see that? Am I holding it in just the right spot? So you can kind of see those brush marks, this kind of funky brush marks. So maybe I'll just do some swirlies over this whole thing, and I'll just break up that surface. So if nothing else, it'll just be this all variegated, different surface, and I won't have these like brush lines, these like directional lines in it. And maybe I'll get some swirlies back behind this guy. Looks like he could have come just out of the briar patch of the curled vines. All right, so I get down. Now it's going to like really punch that rabbit forward, and it gives me a couple different tones instead of just having that one rabbit color. You guys want to see one more? Okay. Sure. I could I'll do that. So Ray went out and he got his silicone. Did you get some? WD-40. He sprayed the Lazy Susan, so now it doesn't screech. Whoa, it's about 50 pounds. Whoa. I was expecting it to be as heavy as a Lazy Susan. Oh, that's what's making that noise.
Chainsaw, Ray had his chainsaw.
Ray's got everything in his truck. All right, this is going to be where my bird goes in the middle. So sometimes I make pots and then I think, how in the world am I going to decorate this? Or how am I going to paint something in this? Having this overhanging edge, it's tough to get spray down in here. And it'll be light in that area. And if you look at the bowl that I've got over there, you can see that really light spray. Is this a good spot? So I'm going to draw this bird in here, and here's one that I don't need a stencil for because I've done this so many times. But sometimes I will look back to the original because it changes if I just leave it up to my brain. And another nice thing is this this line I can change. It's just a pencil line at this point. So if I need to make it a little bit bigger, if I go beyond it with some part of this, I'll be all right. So this is like this bird. It's like squawking at something. It's about to take off. It's angry. All right, so this one, start out with the brown. That's a pretty good amount right there. When I put it on there, it looks thick, and then as it dries, it looks like it's gotten, I can see through it some. That's a good amount.
So have you kept samples of your work that kind of shows your growth on a yearly basis, or?
No, yes and no. Not enough. I once visited, or I hear of like potters who keep like a few of the best pieces out of each kiln. I don't feel like I can do that yet. Maybe I will when I'm older. The one thing I have done though, to try to make up for not having done that, is I've started letting my older daughter and my younger one too pick out a piece, like at my fall show or maybe my spring show, or they came down to the farmer's market and I said, you guys should pick something out. Unfortunately, they'll mostly pick out small stuff. I mean, I guess it's fortunate and unfortunate is they'll like pick out stuff that's like their size. Although my daughter's picked out a pretty nice rolled rim bowl, and I guess I think of it as like, well, at some point in her life, I want her to have these, and I'm going to be gone, and it's going to be awesome that she has this collection of my pots. And oh, here this would be like a good spot. So yeah, so it would be good, but
How long have you been doing the paintings of the rabbits and foxes on the inside of your wall?
fox is about 2 years, maybe, getting close to 2 years. Rabbits were some of the first things. One of the first rabbits I did on the side of a jar, his ears were melting into his head. I put too much glaze on him. And then, so fox is about a year or two, or maybe closer to 2. and alpacas for a while, maybe 5 years. Goats. Somebody asked me to do some boar goats for them, and I pulled a piece out of the kiln, and one of my students had the smarts to say to me, "That is awesome. You should be putting goats on everything." and I was like, "Yeah, I like it. Yeah, maybe I should put some more goats on some pieces." And so luckily that student had that interaction with me, and I was sort of opened my eyes to something that maybe I would have overlooked. And my wife and I would love to have a goat when we get some land. Some pygmy goats, yeah, some little guys.
Fainting goats.
Startled
Or
and they fall
fainting
over.
goats,
Yeah, they get startled
and they just
freeze and
collapse.
fall over. Yeah, their legs will just go stiff and then they'll just fall over.
Oh, that's a real thing.
Yeah, fainting goat. Yeah.
It's just, yeah, it's just,
So here's that darker glaze. I'm gonna try to get this in the right spot. Put a little extra. This looks really thin to me right down there, and that looks pretty thin too. So I'm gonna outline that a little bit, give it some mass, and then there's other parts that I could darken up just because it's a bird. And then I've been doing this thing lately where I'll come back down here with a much less of this on this stain, and that'll be like really. This one you'll probably be able to see. Okay, it's a little bit heavier than I thought it was going to be, but that'll give some depth to that part of the bird there. And then I got to draw his foot in. And this is where this snap of the brush to a point. Can you guys see, is the camera in the right spot? All right, okay, so that having that like brush snap out to a point, it's important in this area. All right, that was quick for last little one. How much time do I have? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? I have a special thing I threw to flip these on, but a smaller bowl will work as well.
so basically, other than your ash glaze, those are the primary colors you use? Is
Yeah.
brown and black?
Yep. And then I've got like a white liner and a clear liner glaze, and I have a Timoku on there, but I actually use amber celadon for a liner as well. But that Timoku that I put on there, if you put that glaze down on a white clay body or like lightish colored clay body, it might happen on dark clay body too, and spray the Rutile glaze over it, like mist it, a really thin layer, you'll get some great shifts in color, like to a yellow and like like a real like reddish brown, like kind of like what is being painted on here. And it'll even go towards amber. And it's on that list.
Oh, okay.
So here's how I do this decoration. And this is like one of the first things. So the whole way, I guess everything started with, I was down in Atlanta, and I remember pulling pots out of the kiln, and I would occasionally get these iron spots. You guys ever had this? Like, especially with ash glaze, you get this like big spot of iron. And I was getting so mad about these darn iron spots that were showing up. And and then they probably stopped, and I was like, huh, where are my iron spots? I want some iron spots. So I started to put iron spots back on the pots, sort of systematically. I would say like, all right, well, I'm going to have an iron spot here and here and here and here, and maybe it was in some sort of pattern. So I got my iron spotting back, and then it was like, oh, well, what happens if I put like a line? And I was noticing that I put these spots on, and the glaze would like move around them, and you could see like the glaze like flow around that iron spot. And I was like, oh, what happens if I put like a bigger spot? What happens if I put a spot of a different glaze? And I was trying all these different things, and I was like, what happens if I put lines on it? And lines will like channel that ash glaze into, they'll either break through it if it's a horizontal line, or if it's a vertical line, it'll channel that glaze into that line as it melts. And then the drawing came out of that. But the first bird picture I did, I just probably didn't have any decoration on it. And then I put lines on it, and then I did this pattern on it. And I don't even know what possessed me to do this. I like did this pattern. I was thinking bird feathers. And somehow I had these brushes, and I was like, oh, I can just lay this brush down and get this bird feather. And that first one had like the best results I've ever gotten out of this process. It's like diamond. It's in the 500 Pictures book. And
This is that finish on your pictures over here?
yeah. So yeah,
So you get resist with this iron?
so what's that?
Does the glaze resist here with the iron?
Yeah, you can, if you go over and look at that picture, you hold it up and really look at it, you can see that there's some glaze on the iron, and it certainly gets in there. And that dark one, that littlest one, I really love like how much different color is in that, is in each one of these iron dots. And it'll channel it in between, and then it grabs the black. Those first ones, though, I just put this line of black through it, and somehow it just grabbed it. I just did it perfect. Like, in some ways, I've been chasing that surface since.
Will you go around these with black?
I won't. No, I'll do the black decoration on them too. That'll be the last thing.
Okay, that goes on top.
Yeah.
So the black does have to help channel the glaze.
It does. Yeah, I think all of it. I think the glaze just doesn't want to be right on top of the oxide, and it just moves away from the oxide. And when it moves away from the oxide, I'm like making it run to certain areas. Like I could just put one of these dots on there, and you'd see the glaze like move around it and come back together underneath. There's probably something out there that you could read about it, or information about it, that could tell you why it does that.
Have you ever put any of those in wood firing?
I have not. No. I don't want to add any unexpected melting to the decoration. For some people that would be perfect, but it would be a little bit too much for me. But you look at somebody like Josh DeWeese, who's got just stuff going on all over the pots, different things. And he probably would like something like that, but I want a little bit more consistency. So I could see through that black. And you can see the way I'm laying this on is so much heavier than I'm painting it on. This is, in order for these lines or these marks to hold up, it's got to be pretty heavy. And if it's too thin, it'll just get washed out by the ash. So they end up looking like these little eggplants. And you can see this brush. This brush is a really good like line, make a pretty good like brush mark, right? It comes back to a point as I pull back towards the middle, it flicks to a little line. You guys see that? It's pretty nice, right? That's one I got from, this is a Happy Dot brush. It says it right on the side. So if you go onto that Oriental Art Supply, like for the Happy Dot brush. I feel like they look bigger or smaller online than when you get them. They're a lot bigger. So I always went, after I realized I'd go for the smaller brush.
So you're gonna put a clear ash glaze over it.
Well, you could put a clear over it. Mine's going to have 2% light rutile and 2% titanium, which is basically rutile's titanium with some iron in it. When it's mined, has iron. So I'm going to put in that 2% rutile, 2% iron or titanium ash glaze, and I'm going to get. It's not quite clear. It's a little bit cloudy, and that probably the rutile probably helps to change the iron as well and lighten it up.
Now, what were you saying, was done on top of the Timaku?
That same glaze. So I basically have two glazes that I mostly use. This one that's the blue black, and the one that's got chrome, cobalt, and iron in it. And then I've got the one that's the rutile and titanium mix, and that's what you see on these two pots. So if it doesn't look like blue to black, then it's the other one, no matter what's. So like on all the decorated pots on the back side of this guy, over the decoration, that's what I'm spraying all the time. All right, and that's it. It'll run, that'll pool, and that'll run, and that'll move in between. So this I put a little bit more glaze on than anything else because I do want it to run.
Is your top spray heavy or?
So this, can you see the bird? You can see, like I've gone with the blower right over this area here and right around this head. You can see how it's like a little bit lighter there, and you can see some of the bigger chunks of the glaze where it pooled or like where it built up there. I've blown those off, and you can see the scrolling vine right there. So that's a pretty good covering. I can still see through it, but just barely. And if there's like light shining on it, if I have to glaze in the shade because if the sun's shining on it, it reflects back too much light and I can't see what I'm doing. So when the sun goes down too far, I have to stop glazing at Guilford because it like shines right into my spray booth area. And I really need to just barely see, which is a hard place to get right. It's like, I can see it. Oh, now I can't see it too much. So for that, so what I would do, this is one of the more complicated ones. So I'd start off, I'd spray the back side, and I've got it on something like this bowl, except it like rolls on the inside. It's like a double-walled vessel. It's like a bowl, and then on the outside, it comes out on the outside. And I've got this on there, and I spray the back side, and I clean all of this off, and then I flip it over. Maybe I do a bunch of the backs, and I flip them over, and then I spray this side. And so when I'm done with it, I can just pick it up from the bottom where I have all this glaze, and it's really heavy, and I don't have to worry about finger marks or getting any off of it because there's enough glaze that's going to change all that. And I can move the pot around this way. If I do this, it's so thin that you're going to see my finger mark. So I can't touch the top at all. So this is a really thin area. These are really thin areas. So I usually spray the blue on. I get this thing rolling around. Sometimes I'll pick it up if it's a big piece because I just can't get to the middle. It's too far away. So I'll pick it up and I'll spray this area. In the spray guns, I have a Bailey one, and you can adjust the nozzle, how far up it is or how low down. And the more you lower it, the less material you're picking up as it sprays air over the nozzle. So I lower that down so I'm barely getting any out of it, and I spray the blue on this side. And then I come back and I lower it down so I'm barely getting any out of it. And I spray over the whole thing with the rutile. And I try to go around as close to the bird as I can. I didn't do it on these, which is why there's so much brown. But I try to get as close as I can to the bird without hitting the bird with any glaze. And then I go, and also the vine, and I go back and I spray over those things. And then I might go like twice over those. And I come back and I blow the beak off. And maybe if I feel like I got too much on the body, I'll blow some of that away with just air to lighten it up. So yeah, so here it's heavier, and it just takes time if you want to do it. And then with the ones with something like this is painted on the same way I did the rabbit, and I'm just giving like an overall spray I just like moving it and just spraying. And I try not to hit the center, because if you go over the center as it's spinning, I'll like roll the sprayer around like this, hitting the surface. And if I keep going into the middle, by the time I get all the way around, I've got this like really thick amount of glaze in the middle, and it's really much thinner at the edge. So I try to keep it even and try not to go into that middle too much, because I can always go back and touch it up. And the same thing, I spray the backs of these first. And then these guys, if you're going to spray something like this first things you do is spray down here, 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 and here, because those are the spots that you're not going to get. And I spray this, and then this, and I have it up on the Lazy Susan, and then I start to spray the black in, and I get that black over the whole thing. And then this has some paper over it. You can use tape as well. Although this will suck up glaze, and glaze will run off of it, which makes a difference when you're spraying like with 40 pounds of pressure. That glaze is just going to the sides, and you get like a really thick amount of glaze on the outer edge. But the paper, when it sucks up the moisture, then it like delaminates the paper, and you try to peel it off, and you get like the glue part of the stuff stays back, and the paper rips off. So I spray it last, and I peel it right off before it gets saturated. And then I spray a little bit of Rutile there, and I go over this guy, and same thing, I go around it as close as I can without getting that Rutile on him, and then I spray him last. Yeah, so that's pretty good. Some of this is breaking up, and some of this is breaking up a little bit, but you can still see the eye and the nose and the mouth, and so you can put it together, even if there's some areas that start to bubble. And then if something like the middle of this bowl, it's hard to get enough glaze down there and not too much. So it's a lot thinner here. But you can see where I've painted that iron on a little bit heavier here, and it's much lighter up in these areas. And it's those subtle things, and it's never the same. It's, you know, if you looked at that and said, I love the sort of atmospheric stuff that happens, I'll never get that again like that. Or, you know, or I love the way that like this one doesn't have any of that, you know, it's just, and everything's crisp and clean. It doesn't always go that way. I think that's it. I went over a few minutes, or maybe I'm right at time.